Okay, now there are reports that say one person has died after over 5,000 teenagers stormed the Mall of Africa this past weekend. They were taking part in a TikTok challenge called Latwizi. This is just one of many challenges on social media, with others much more dangerous. Some have even seen teenagers hang themselves. Let's discuss this now with social media law expert Emma Sedlia. Emma, good afternoon. Welcome to today. I saw the visuals on TikTok. This is just crazy stuff. This is just dangerous. Just wonder why would young people partake in such in social media, and what are the consequences?
Yeah, it really does reek of criminality. The consequences can be vast. They can be a whole range of things. The most obvious, of course, is criminal consequences. So what appears to happen in these challenges is this sort of mob mentality, this mob psychology. I'm sure we all remember when we were little, our parents saying to us, if somebody tells you to jump in the fire, are you going to jump in the fire? It's this like following the sheep thing. And you really, I'm in the game and I'm often the first responder when things go wrong, but I can tell you, I always think I've seen it all. This is a whole new world of just crazy. So we have seen a whole lot of TikTok challenges resulting in arrests around the world. Most recently in New York, there was a whole lot of teenagers between 12 and 18 arrested for what they called the Kool-Aid Man challenge. These people throwing themselves through fences in public, their neighbors' fences, damaging property, and a lot of people arrested and charged. So this Latwizi challenge seems to be that teenagers kind of mob a mall, cause chaos, and leave. But it does sound like things went pretty wrong at the Mall of Africa on Saturday.
Yes, and there's a report of one person dead. And I saw in some of these visuals that we are showing our viewers now for what happened there, you could even see some teenagers amongst themselves having a brawl of sorts.
So there seems to be quite a lot of footage of brawls. There was a fight in a car park. The Mall of Africa has come out and said there was no death. There was another report that there'd been a stabbing and that teenager was recovering in hospital. But these are young kids. And I think it's, for me, the biggest thing, Dan, and I know I always said to you and to anybody I speak to, is that the best line of defense against a lot of the online harms that we're seeing is active, involved, engaged, aware parents. And we cannot discount that. I have got no doubt that the parents of these teenagers had no idea that their children were either there, or if they were there, involved in this ridiculous challenge. I've started saying in my talks at schools that I actually object to talking about TikTok challenges, because if you get involved in a TikTok challenge, you're just clearly so dumb. But I suppose that's not very helpful, because these kids are doing it, right? There's all sorts of different challenges around the place. And we know, particularly because of the CEO of TikTok, Shu Chu, he was giving testimony in the US Congress last week. TikTok, very big news around the world, whether or not TikTok should be banned, whether or not it's really can be used as this huge tool for propaganda, whether it is bad for our teenagers' mental health. I'm very clear on what I believe it does to teenagers, but the TikTok's algorithm can really influence thinking of teenagers. And we've got to understand that this is a tool that can be used to orchestrate these huge mob attacks, right? So we can't underestimate how powerful these tools are, how dangerous they can be in the wrong hands, their ability to recruit potential people to come and join these attacks. Dan, I've got to remind you, the age of criminal capacity in South Africa is 14 years old, sometimes even as young as 12, depending on the child, but definitely from 14, full criminal capacity. Now, what that means is that you have capacity to commit a criminal offense. If you go and kill somebody, you can be arrested and charged with murder. It's no good the police coming and you saying, oh, well, I'm so sorry, Mr. Officer, but I'm so young, I didn't know. Like, that's not going to help you. So the fact that these crimes, because I do believe that a lot of what we're talking about is criminal activity, public violence, damage to property, there's certainly assault GBH, it sounds like. these kids can actually be criminally charged. And as we know from so many cases we've spoken about in the past, that all content on social media can be used as evidence.
Yeah, the repercussions are very serious. I'm not aware of any arrests at what happened in Mall of Africa this past weekend, but you've mentioned arrest in a similar type or different type of social media madness on TikTok in New York. And so the role of parents, I understand. And you've mentioned that some countries are currently debating whether or not to ban TikTok. What is the role of monitoring agencies? I mean, parents have a role to know what their kids are busy with, because our children are here on these devices all the time, even with schooling issues. And with the pandemic, we know that we live in a hybrid world. There's a lot of dependency on virtual this and virtual that. What about authorities' role to monitor this? Or will that be seen as interfering in the freedom of people to engage and entertain themselves the way they wish?
No, I don't think that there's any issue about monitoring. I suppose there's a question of monitoring versus kind of using social media as evidence. If there is evidence on social media of a criminal act, there is no question that content can be used. Now, how that comes to the authorities' attention, to the police's attention, whether they see it themselves or whether there's a case, social media is obviously a huge evidence gathering source for an event like this one. If you just think just about all of those thousands of teenagers had phones, were live streaming, were recording. I mean, if you just use the hashtags on TikTok, you can see, literally thousands of videos of what happened, and that can be incredibly useful in terms of prosecuting. It's crazy because these kids are almost like giving us the evidence themselves, which really is mad. But it's something that we're seeing all the time.
So we've spoken about this before, you and I, Emma. Perhaps this is an opportunity. Several of my colleagues here at ENCA have got teenage children. I don't have any more teenage children in my household. But what would you advise them? I mean, especially understanding the repercussions here, that they could be criminally liable as they go around storming these malls, the shopping centers, anywhere from the age of 14 upwards.
So, just on what we were talking about before, I've just remembered this expression I used to use in my talks, is that a smart criminal doesn't have a smartphone. Because the reality is, and it's kind of what I was trying to express a moment ago, is that we create the paper trail. Even in sort of the cyberbullying cases that I deal with at schools, in the old days, you have to call somebody and say, did this happen? Did this happen? It was a he said, she said kind of situation. And now we've got the screenshots. We've got the evidence. So I think that for parents to remind your children, not even remind your children, teach your children, because there's so much ignorance, Dan, and we know that because we didn't grow up being publishers. We didn't grow up in the smartphone era where everyone has the ability to publish, sometimes thinking about it and being careful about what you're publishing, but sometimes just going live, which you're in the business of going live. You know how stressful it is and how things can go wrong. And now we're putting this technology in the hands of these young children who simply don't have the brain development to make good choices. We know that the impulsivity means that mad stuff happens. And I think for parents, you've got to run interference there. You've got to educate your children, teach them about when criminal capacity starts, civil capacity starts, what the laws are, the fact that as soon as something is digital, it's out of your control. It can be used as evidence. It can be used in disciplinary inquiries. It can compromise your reputation way down the line. If any of these kids wants to run for president one day, that content is out there. That people, the digital vigilante mob will go back and find this content. We're seeing kids mess up, and then 10 years down the line, content resurfacing and people being fired as adults. So we're talking about law, we're talking about disciplinary consequences, and we're talking about looking after your reputation, treating yourself like the celebrity you've become. Most of all, we're talking about being a good human. Don't get involved in criminality.
Yeah, I have very strong views about TikTok. When it was starting and becoming a craze, I thought, do you know TikTok? Because I work in media, I went on TikTok and I saw a lot of nonsense and stupid stuff and happening there. Really, some of the dumbest things you can see are on TikTok. And I think the responsibility lies with us as well, general societies, to besides the parents, to educate our young ones. Thank you very much for your time and views and insights this afternoon. Emma Sedlia, social media law expert, talking about this crazy stuff called Latwizi. I mean, more than 5,000 teenagers storming the Mall of Africa this past weekend. Apparently, there was one death, but according to Emma, Mall of Africa says they did not record any death on their side. But whatever has happened, I mean, really, this is dangerous stuff. Please warn your children, your teenagers. They are criminally liable if any damage happens there. And the laws in this country allow anybody above 14 years old to be criminally charged.